Namaste. Welcome to Buddha's teaching. My name is Soti Tim. First of all, I'd like to pay respect to the Triple Gems. I'd like to pay respect to the Buddha. I'd like to pay respect to the Dharma. And I'd like to pay respect to the Sangha. Hello again, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. Hopefully everything is okay, it's all good with you all. I'm here and you are there. That means we are still breathing and we are still experiencing life. So today I like to touch on the subject of the ego again, as the title implies, the Great Wall of Ego. For many of us, we don't quite get a good idea of what ego means. Okay, the ego in Buddhism covers a whole bunch of emotion that we have. Okay, the emotional activities that the mind manifests. Right. It's not just a small portion that normally in the society, in the Western society, when we refer to the word ego, we normally say, let's say, the person has a big ego, right? So that is the common thing that many people use the word ego. Is that the person is like, let's say, most likely it's about a person who is of a higher status, have a higher class, or wealthy people who like to show off, or like to show off materially that what they have, or to show the way they look, how good they look, or to show off their intellectual prowess. In other words, to show off that they're smart. Okay, things like that. So a lot of times that is the kind of ego that we refer to, right? We refer to the people who we think that they are showing off their intelligence, they are showing off their status and their wealth and things like that. So that is, for most of us, that's how we look at ego. Okay, and that's about it. But in Buddhism, ego covers a whole host of emotional activity that the mind manifests. Okay, it doesn't just stop there. All right, the ego applies to all the emotional activities that is happening inside of all of us. So, for example, when people are upset, okay, and they're not happy, and they walk around with a long face or whatever, okay, and for most of the people, we just say he or she is upset or angry and stuff like that. But that is also ego. Okay, because that is a display of an emotion, right? The person is being upset, the person is being mad, or the person is stressed, right? And that is all ego. Okay, so ego in Buddhism covers all the emotion that we have. Okay, not just someone showing off their pride, or not just like that. So the ego has many faces. Okay, so in order for us to understand truly understand all the faces of ego, we have to understand the different kinds of mental activities, the different kinds of minds that we have, all right, and what comprise those minds, and what kind of emotion that those minds generate, and out of that we have ego. And so why is it that we call it ego? Because when there's a word ego, we have to also remember that the ego is referring to something that is called self. Okay, self-I. So the ego and the self-I's, they are together. Okay, the without the I, there is no ego. Okay, so that's why in Buddha's teaching, the Buddha lead us to show what is ego and what is not ego. Okay, and what is not ego arise from non-self, right? When there's no self, then there is no ego. But for most of us, we operate on the surface level of the so-called self. Okay, so as we operate on the surface, which is self, so we all have ego. Okay, more or less. The more we have, the bigger ego that we have, or the bigger I that we perceive ourselves to, the more ego we have, right? The bigger ego that we have, and of course, this leads to bigger suffering. Okay, in Buddha's teaching, the Buddha pointed out that this ego here is the very source of suffering. Okay, so the bigger the ego that we have, the bigger the source of our suffering, and of course the bigger the suffering that human beings have. Okay, so we have to know what is this ego is all about. For most of us, we are as ordinary people. Okay, the self-I is always with us. Okay, as we walk this earth, from the time that we get up from our bed until the time that we go back to sleep, we most likely, most of the time, for most of us, we are walking with the ego, with the sense of self-I. All right. It's unlike the Buddha, who was the fully enlightened person, and his disciple. For the rest of us, we are full of it, more or less. Okay, and so that is something that we just need to realize, and we need to understand, and we need to cultivate. In another word, why we do that is because the more we understand about this ego, about this self-I, the more we can be liberated from it, because as we see into the root of suffering, and we see that it is because of this ego. Okay, but it requires study, it requires understanding. Okay, see, as you and I, as we walk around, we get up in the morning without thinking, right? We walk, we wash up, we brush our teeth, we wash our face, we take a shower. Okay, look in the mirror, we tidy up our hair, right? Put the makeup and you know, the clothes and all that. In all of that, you know, looking at the mirror, it's all about the self-I. Okay, it's all about the self-I, and for most of us who are, you know, more or less healthy, and we have to that we get up every day, that we go to school and we go to work, we always in without saying anything, it's just automatic that there's a self-I doing all of this stuff, right? Doing all the dressing and go eating and then going to school, right? Driving or taking the bus or whatnot. It's all about I. Okay, there's I everywhere. Okay, and a lot of time, you know, people look in the mirror, right? Left and right, right, from the back and things like that. You know, people who are healthy or people who are young, you know, they look and they are, you know, pretty, you know, pleased with who they are. Okay, look in the mirror and smile and things like that. So that all of that, see, all of that thing, that is ego right there. Okay, so now at least you can see it, when I point out this like this, now we see that ego is who we are. Okay, who we identify ourselves with, the way we look, all right, the way we look, the way we dress, you know, our youth, right, how pretty we are, how you know, how handsome we look, okay, or either that or how successful we are, right, or how poor we are. That's also ego. Okay, when you have a feeling of sort of like, you know, oh no, I'm not that good, you know, I'm poor and things, that's also ego. Okay, and you know, and also for people who are smart, you know, they go there out there and you know, walk into a classroom and meet their friends, and they have this feeling inside without telling people, but they're feeling that I'm smart, you know, that is ego. Okay, that is ego. So see, you see, ego is it has a lot with what our mind thinks. Okay, the mind thinks of itself. Okay, not in another word. So whatever the mind think of itself, that is ego. Okay, because then and there is a self. Okay, so the ego is everywhere, right? So because of this, you know, the ego and is, you know, operating, is in the operating system, right? That the mind is doing. So of course the ego is always you know, protecting itself. Okay, if somebody says something to criticize you and things like that, you know, right? So the ego becomes offended, and the ego will react back, right? It's called a reaction, right? Based on whatever scenario that we meet on a day-to-day basis. So now you can see that the ego is pretty much pretty much run the show. Okay, without realizing, if we don't realize what the ego is, all right, if we have no clue. Okay, and the ego runs the show, the ego runs the world. Okay, because the ego has the thinking mind, which under its spell, or you know, okay, under its control, and because of that, the ego runs the world. Okay, it's you versus me. Okay, there's a self I here and the self I over there. Right. So, and that is the reason why we all have issue with in life. Is because we have no understanding of what this thinking mind that is running our lives, what it is, and that is why we identify ourselves with that very thinking mind. Okay, that is I, that is the existing I. Okay, and because of that, that existing I is very self-defensive thing, right? Self-defensive. I think that's what you that's how you say it. So now you see how big or how great the wall of the ego wall is. Okay, okay. Let me give you another example. So let's say you were having conversation. I'm sure you have run into conversation with maybe your friends or with your parents. Okay, with your brother or sister or something like that, and they say something to upset you. Okay, so that is just one little example, because there's so many things that can make us upset. But so let's say somebody criticizes your thinking, or they have different opinion from you regarding especially religions and politics, right? Or somebody scold at you. Okay, put you down. Okay, look down at you, and things like that. So now you become upset. Okay, you are mad and you become upset. You don't like what you hear. Whatever it is, it hurts, right? It hurts you. Okay, so, and you hold it inside that the person is hurting you. Okay, so right then and there, okay, you have to, I'm gonna point it out along the way, that when you're feeling hurt, you're feeling upset by somebody say something, that feeling that you have right there, okay, it's the reaction of the ego. Okay, that is inside you right there. Okay, the mind don't like what it hears. Okay, so now, but the thing is, for most of us, when we become upset with what we hear, right, or with what we see, or with what we smell or we taste and things like that, we just become upset. Okay, so for example, we just become mad and we hold it inside. Okay, we are mad. So with that, okay, when we are upset, right, when we are not happy, okay, we have no clue. All right, we have no clue that very emotion, that very feeling that we have, okay, that is the ego. Okay, that is what we call the ego. But for most of us, we don't see that. Okay, we are not aware of that. Okay, we are not mindful of what the mind is doing. That's the thing. So there is no awareness in what ego is, right? We totally have no clue. Okay, when we upset, when we whatever the feeling that we have, for most of us, that's who we are. We are just upset with and we hold on to that feeling inside. Sometimes we don't talk about it, right? We don't want to talk about it. We rather keep it in here. That is ego. Okay? Or sometimes you're mad and then you yell, okay, you're angry, or you have, whatever comes in. That is ego. So ego plays many scenarios, many ways. They display in many kinds of activities. Sometimes the ego fight back, yes, and sometimes the ego say, they just hold, they keep it inside. But it's all the manifestation of the ego that we all have. Okay, so when it's like that, we are not aware. Okay, for most of us, we are not aware that that is the ego that we are talking about right there. Okay, it's not anywhere else. It's when it's happening, okay, inside, when we are like this, okay, when we are mad, or when we are whatever, you can see on the face of the person. If you look from, or if somebody look at you, they can see how you feel, or you express in your body function, the way you act, or the facial expression. You can see the ego manifesting. Okay, because that's what human beings are. It's displaying, the ego is running the show, displaying all kinds of show that human beings are not aware of. That is the reason. And the stronger this ego, the bigger and the more suffering that the person can have. Okay, and that is why in Buddha's teaching, the Buddha, when the Buddha talk about awareness, right, talking about what we call sati, right, that we have mentioned before, having sati, meaning having awareness. Having awareness of what? Having awareness of that very emotion, of that very thinking mind that we have. Okay, but it's easier said than done, because the ego has been running our life, right, up until this point and into the future. Okay, if we are not aware and we are not awake to it, the ego keeps running it like this. Okay, it's right in front of us, but we cannot see it. That's the thing. Okay, so when you are upset, you're sitting there, and you sit there in your room, or you sit there, on your chair. Sometimes you even pretend to watch TV or play game, but at the back of your mind, you're still mad. You're still upset with somebody. Okay, that's all ego. Okay, and you cannot help it, because you said, I'm human. That's why I have this. Well, okay, that is right there. That is the problem. Okay, if you don't see that as a problem, then you're gonna accept that ego as it is, and you're gonna continue to suffer. Okay, until you become to realize that no, that is the ego, that is the function of the ego mind. Okay, the mind that is running negatively inside. Okay, and you have to be able to awake to that, the function of the mind, when you have that feeling. Okay, when you have the feeling of whatever, or like this, hold down like this, sad, depressed, or anger, during that time you have to be able to catch it. Okay, to catch it and say, oh, that is the function of the thinking mind, of the ego mind, which is called the self. Okay, which is called the self. And that so you have to be able to catch that, okay, so that you can take yourself out from that emotion, okay, because up until now, let's say, the emotion is you, okay. When you're upset with whoever, right, your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, your friends, sibling or whatnot, you hold it here 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, months or years. Sometimes you don't talk to each other. It's because what? That ego is having a full grip 100% on top of you, okay. Because of that, you don't understand that it's just the ego that is working, that is holding on to it, holding on to you, okay. And you have to come to a realization that that is not you, that is the mental process, okay, the mental process that is holding you hostage, okay. And that is very difficult for a lot of people to see, okay. If you think that the Great Wall, whatever of whatever wall that you wanna think about, this wall here is very difficult to break, okay. The Great Wall of ego is the most difficult, yet it is right there, it's right there within all of us, but most of us, we cannot see that, okay. Whatever that we go through in our life, okay, that's who we are, okay. That's how we identify ourselves with. And of course, when there's ego here that identify itself with this one, and then there's another ego here, and then when these two ego here don't like to each other or something, boom, right? The whole world will never experience peace. And this is what the world is all about, okay. This world is run by ego, okay. So the world is try its best, but there is no such a thing as a peaceful world, okay. The world will always go through ups and downs because the world is run by ego, okay. The world is run by ego. So it is of utmost importance for all of us, or for you at least anyway, to come to realize what ego is, okay. Whenever you have, especially when you have a down feeling, remember right away that that's not you. That is the product of the thinking mind. That is called the ego. That is called the self, okay. When the ego is in that mode, okay, it make you have a unwholesome mood, okay. You're feeling down, you're upset, okay, you're having grudge. You don't know that you're having grudge or you're holding grudge, but it's right there, okay. You have to realize that is just the ego, and that ego is saying I. All right, that ego right there is saying I. Okay, I am, I am upset because he or she is saying something, doing something, okay, that the self I or the ego I doesn't like. Okay, if there is no ego, if there is no self I, okay, then there is no one there being offended. Okay, but that is so critical because the ego has this perception of its existence. That's why it says there's an I. Okay, there's an I that exists, and so because of that, the ego is hurt, right? The ego is offended, the ego is upset, and the ego is stressed. Okay, because there's the ego, the self-created I by the mental thinking, by the mind thinking, that is called ego. Okay, so when the I is big, the suffering from that is also big. Okay, that's why it's so important about how that we need to understand about this ego self I. Okay, so in Buddha's teaching, that is why the Buddha say, okay, so let's take a look at this ego. Okay, let's take a look at this self I that we identify ourselves with. Right? What is this I? All right. So, and this I, of course, now the Buddha teach you into the step of looking at this I that we refer ourselves to, and the I that we refer to as ourselves is comprised of the body and the mind, right? The body and the mind, or sometimes we say we call it the five aggregates. Okay, the five aggregates has in it is the body, which is the form, right? Rupa, the form. Okay, and then the other four aggregates is the feeling, Vedana, right? Perception, Sanya, okay, and then mental formation, Sankhara, okay, and then consciousness, Vijnana, okay. So that's why the Buddha bring us to see what is this I that we are referring to, that the mind is working so hard to protect. What is this I? Okay, so as the Buddha take us drill into further into what is the self I, the ego that the ego is constructing to, and that the ego is protecting. What is the self I? Okay, because the self I, the nama, rupa, or the five aggregates, the Buddha breaks it down into, okay, body and mind, right? What is the body that we refer ourselves to? What is the mind that we refer ourselves to? Okay, so as we drill down into a more deeper level of the body, then we cannot see that is like we talked about it before. Okay, are we referring to this as my name Soti? Is this Soti? No, that's the head, right? Is this Soti? No, that's the ear, right? Is this Soti? No, that's the chin, right? So you say, oh, okay, no, all right. So Soti is the whole body, right? So in another word, there isn't a Soti, but it's a combination. It's an aggregate, right? It's made up. It's composed of many things, flesh and blood and bones and everything else in between. Okay, and you can break it down even more further. You see the heart, the lungs, and all that stuff that makes us who we are. And then we break down. There's no Soti anywhere in the rupa, in the form, right? But a combination of different organs, of different things, right? So the more we break it down, the more we can understand that this form here has no Soti anywhere. It's just a combination, right? It's a composition of many little things that comes together and function together. So and then we can turn around and say, okay, if we don't call the form as who we are. All right, let's talk about the mind. And of course, the mind or the four aggregates, then that's where Buddha's teaching shine. Okay, break down the mind, see what the mind is, and then boom, we see that the mind rise and fall based on condition. There is no soti anywhere in that mind. Okay, but the mind rise and fall based on condition, based on experience. So where is I? Right. So that's the teaching. There is no I anywhere, but there is experience. There is thing that is we are experiencing, but there's no I. Okay, but this is, I'm talking it here quick, but it requires a lot understanding, and we have covered many episodes already. Okay, the more you get to understand about non-self, okay, about the self that we always refer ourselves to, I am this, I am that. After that I become small, then we have less suffering. Okay, the reason that we have a lot of suffering is because our self I is very big. Okay, our identification with the self I is very big. Okay, our status, our look, our fame, our fortune, our money is very, the self I is very big, it's very bloated. Okay, but once you understand about the non-self, poof. Okay, or if not totally poof, at least if the I is becoming less, has less power that's grab onto it, okay, it becomes weak, then you have less suffering because you're not clinging to things much anymore. There's still clinging going on because it's been a habit for all of our many lives. So, but still, after you understand what this I is or no I, then you start to become less and less clinging, less attached to things, and less attached to self. Okay, and that's what we call liberation. That is the road that the Buddha pointed us to take. That if you want to understand about life, okay, about what is this all about, why there is suffering, okay, what is the root cause, and then the Buddha say, see, the root cause is that self I. Okay, it's that self I. So there is the end of that once we discover for ourselves, right, through and through, okay, that the self I is nowhere. Then when the cultivation starts, then we start to see the path right in front of us, that what is it that we need to do, okay, that we need to cultivate, what is it? And as we progress, then we see that the liberation from the self-I leads us automatically. The liberation leads us automatically to the end of suffering. Okay, the end of suffering is when we are totally eradicated all the defilement, all the attachment to the self-I. Okay, that is the total liberation. Okay, right now we are full of ourselves, and that is the reason why we all experience life as the way we are, okay, ups and downs and everything else in between. So that's what I like to share with you all today. The wall of ego is right here, it's right there, it's right in every single one of us. It is in our mind. Okay, and because of that, this mind right here is where everything happens. All right? The good, the bad, the ugly, the wholesome, the unwholesome, and the end of suffering is all in the mind. Okay? There's nowhere else. It's all in the mind. Okay? So until next time, I wish you all the best. And as we approach the end of the year again, have a happy holiday season to those who celebrate the season. Okay, so until next time, I like again to pay respect to the Triple Gems. I like to pay respect to the Buddha. I like to pay respect to the Dharma, and I like to pay respect to the Sangha. Namaste, everyone.